He is greatest. There's no greater. He's our country's great dictator. Niet. We have leader who is very best, bare of chest, scariest, plays it by the book, democratic man, 'cause the party isn't over yet, oppriv yet, Soviet. Power has new look, very sexy man. People, it's your favorite comrade here, Vladimir. Glad I'm here. President with guts, always wins the vote. They respect me, popular your note. Try eject me, better fetch your coat. Re-elect me, doesn't mean to gloat. And I will crack your nuts. Democracy runs speedier, at a better rate with a one-party state. And when you run state media, just in case control, army of Facebook troll, we're rooting for Vlad Putin, he's straight shooting, disagree, and you'll see. Foreigners obey. I'm really aware that like loads of people do podcasts who are very famous and are very brilliant thinkers and have lots to say. So part of you is always thinking, well, what have I got to say? But then you just know we're all individual and we're all finding our own way and we've all got something unique to say, and it's not about being better or worse.
Sure.
It's just about being true.
Exactly, like the comparison, it can creep in, right? That what's our reference point to where we sit?
Yeah.
How big's our dick in the sea of men that are out there? It's like that's the measurement. It's like that's how we evolutionary are understanding our place in the tribe or our place in the world.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I take that metaphor, but like I think when you find the perfect sized dick, I suppose, is when you realise what you are. Then you're relaxed.
Yeah.
When you know who you are and you know your place. Not in a kind of like pushing you down kind of way, but just knowing who, like where you're supposed to be, which path you're on.
Sure.
Walking it. Nothing can be more right than that. And so there may be people out there who are bigger, but they're doing their thing and you're doing your thing. And I think if you're outside of what your actual own path, you're always going to be slightly stressed. Even if you're under your path as well, if you're like actually making yourself smaller than you need to be.
Stressed.
If you're making yourself bigger than you need to be, but if you're just right.
It's that window of tolerance.
Yeah.
And that can be related to nervous system, or how much are you pushing yourself and how often are you pushing yourself. That window of tolerance can be like the right amount, just the right amount for you to get the growth, for you to be integrated, rather than always being on the edge, meeting your edge. It's actually too much.
It's too much.
It can be like spending your time, always pushing the edge in maybe psychedelics, maybe like going there. That's as an example. If you're always doing that, then like, where's the space to breathe and come back from that? But I think we're going to find out of what your makeup is and what you've got to contribute to the conversation. I've got a feeling quite a lot. What do you think's missing from the podcast world or the content creation? Like, what don't you hear enough of? What do you think there's space for?
People saying just what they want to say, like without absolutely unfiltered. I think the filtering that happens with podcasts, and actually the bigger you get, the more you're thinking exactly of what you should be saying and what message you should be trying to get across. And I think maybe more, and the whole podcast world is moving in this direction of allowing just like ordinary conversation to come out. But I still feel like people are being really smart and being really like targeted, and it's good though. It was also good if people do that, but I think maybe just a little bit more of not trying to be good at what they're doing would be good for podcasts. Just rolling wherever you go, because I think that's what people actually like about it.
Yes.
Not knowing what's coming next.
Yes.
To feel like you're in on this kind of improvised moment.
Yeah. But there is a what works, and what works and what gets likes and what there is an algorithm to life. It's like quick fixes, like everyone wants them. So it taps into our listener audience side of actually just wanting the information. Just give me the thing that will make the thing work. Yeah. But actually that gets people watching and it's going to get likes. But is it actually sustainable? Is it actually rooted in something that's going to help long term? And that's the thing that is, for me, it's like, are you in your integrity or are you just trying to sell a product?
Yeah.
It's also, are you just trying to get views? Then,
like, a few years ago, I wouldn't have used the word energy. I'd have found that frustrating and vague and new agey.
Great.
But now I actually use it because I'm sort of stuck for words, because if you're creating some kind of energy with what you're saying, it doesn't kind of really matter what you're saying. Actually, you're tuning someone in, and that's why I've started to realize there's two things going on. There's actually what you say, and then there's the vibe you give off as you say it. And I think that being aware of that and just is sort of knowing that is a good thing in itself.
Yeah, that's the majority really of the context. It's like how you're saying it, and how also what's your body saying. I think people are reading people way more than they're listening to what they say. I would like to think so.
Yeah. Yeah. The body. I think this is like a big part of. You seem very embodied. You know, you were doing the movement stuff before we started, and you look like you're in shape, and good skin, and all this stuff. It like matters. It's sort of and the more we can be in that, and not necessarily being super clever. I mean, I spent so much of my life trying to be clever, and on some levels I succeeded, but that just takes you more and more into this space where it's easy to lose contact with your body.
Well, yeah.
And I think at the heart of walking and pilgrimage and the history of it in our culture is that it was banned in Britain as they were trying to move from the body to the mind. So the philosophy of around the 16th century of Erasmus was all to try. He was a bit like a sort of Stephen Hawking, like disembodied mind. And he was trying to make all of religion, all of Christianity across Europe, more about the word, more about ideas, more about, like, I suppose, consciousness, and they were trying to remove Henry VIII, Thomas Cromwell, all these people. They were trying to, Martin Luther. They were all trying to remove the body from the equation. So all the stuff like smudging and incense and gongs and all this sensory stuff that we're now really craving they tried to remove it, and they did remove it really effectively, and it all became about reading a book and going on a mental journey.
To instruments as well, right?
Yeah.
Just in general, like what they did to Irish culture, they like banned the harp, I think, for a while. It was like such a access point to something outside of themselves, maybe.
And we see it with the Taliban and more current stuff as well, where they ban music and sex and sexiness and the body stuff.
Yeah. That's where the vinyl record and I think that came popularized in underground basements in Germany, where it was illegal to play music out in public or something. And then it really took off, because it used to be about watching a live audience. No one was playing records just to listen to music. It was all live performance. And I'm pretty sure it was related to Germany and the ruling classes dictating what was going on. And then it forced things to go underground, and then they started actually putting on records and partying. Very interesting.
That is interesting. I've never thought about vinyl being a kind of embodiment of sound. It kind of is, isn't it? Yeah. And actually computing, they're moving towards analog computing, not digital. I wonder what that means. So
why did you have an aversion to energy? What was
because
going on there?
I think I found the new age. I was resisting the new age movement a bit. I thought it was vague intellectually. I thought it was often not grounded. Like often the people were using words in a kind of imprecise way, and it was sort of, it felt like a kind of bit of a free-for-all, and I didn't trust it because of that.
I mean, all correct things, right?
Yeah,
I'd say, yeah.
It's true, but then I started to realize why that might be the case.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because I think what the New Age movement is trying to find is a kind of space in which there's less like direct knowing of everything. More direct knowing and less like mind. And that can make people a bit kind of loose. But there's something good about it too. And I think I was maybe not appreciating what's good about it. And maybe when people say you just need to be in touch with your body, and I heard those words, but I didn't really know what they meant. I agree. I mean, you can't really disagree. It sounds like a good thing. Yeah, okay, I'll be in touch with my body. But like the subtlety of what that actually means, it's not just about like becoming fitter or being in the gym or making your body better in terms of what it looks like or what it feels like. It's more like your relationship with it, and whether it feels like a friend or not, or whether you're like in conversation and merely subtle. But in terms of the energy thing, I think I just heard the word so many times. I thought this word has become basically meaningless. But then it kind of has to be in a weird way meaningless, because it's a felt thing. You feel it. You don't know exactly.
I overlook how much I do use that, but I love using it because it is vague, it is ineffable. It's describing the way something is without defining it or labeling it in a way.
Yeah.
So I'm not putting things in a box and making sense of them so I'm safe. It's like their energy was like, it was really vibrant or whatever it might be, but I'll term it in that way of like describing something in which, where's it coming from, like what's the energy in which it's living, I guess, because everything's like animate, right? That you can see the world in that way. Everything has an energy. Like this room has an energy, and everything kind of does remember. They say that about water, like it holds memory. And I always find that really fascinating. And that's, I guess, going off on more esoteric kind of ways of thinking. Rooms can hold energy. And if you ever been to a haunted house or something, that, like, just as an example, it's like, you can kind of understand that.
I think you're getting to the point of it. It's like when the thing about using the word energy, because it doesn't mean anything intellectually, you have to start feeling it. You can't it forces you into the feeling zone, and that's, I think, where it would be better for a lot of us to spend more time, especially in the places, in India they talk, when they often ask you where you were born, where's the place that you came from. The place really matters. And you mentioned water and memory. I think it's esoteric at the moment. I mean, people think it does sound pretty esoteric. And I think it's because we really don't understand water. But I've got a friend working on how we can make hard drives and storage out of water. The water, like you're actually using this memory for the full-on effect of like storing everything in water. I mean, you've got to take this. How far do you go? He's also trying to create an analog computer, like what we were talking about earlier. But wow. I mean, it's esoteric now. The things that seem esoteric now become mainstream. I mean, you've probably noticed in the last few years things have changed
I was saying
so much.
Previous conversation about how science is really catching up with what parts of the world have been really rooted in culture for a long time.
Yeah,
and I think because we are cultureless to some extent. Great podcast I did with who was it with? A guy about Ian McKenzie. I spoke to you about him, and he talked about this kind of. It's not that it's cultureless. It actually, our culture lives off other cultures and like extracts it and almost like denudes it or like just takes from it, and it's like, okay, there's actually something to that. Like it kind of. If there was like a disease and it was eating up other things to live from, I kind of like, wow, okay, is our culture doing that? And it kind of has done. it's kind of centralized. And if you look at like just mainstream culture of like centralizing certain things, I was like, yeah.
Yeah, and then now there's this backlash against cultural appropriation. You know, it's like a really unfashionable thing to do. I mean, and you think, well, if you don't do it, then we have like nothing.
I really have a hard time with that.
Stagnation.
There's this meme. Someone's in Mexico. There's like a fancy dress mariachi band, and people say that's cultural appropriation. And this person goes into like Mexican communities and say, "What do you think of this?" And they're like, "It's funny," and they're like, they have no problem with it.
Yeah.
But us over here seem to have problems with how we portray and dress up as other.
I mean, fancy dress parties. I mean, they're blatantly cultural appropriation, like toga parties. Like, does that mean you're appropriating ancient culture or something? I mean, you kind of are, but like, I think we've always had this thing in us to dress up as something else, to try it out, just to sort of play. It's like playing. We're going a bit off topic, but I don't even really know what the topic is.
I'd love to know why you, as a younger former in your forming years, were like, what was the need to really be academic? What do you think that was driven from?
Well, I mean, you kind of never really know truly why you do anything, like on
Sure.
some level. Like some level you can come up with some reason, but there's always I feel there's always a bigger plan going on, a kind of greater plan for me.
Okay.
That I don't understand.
Great.
And the less I try and understand it, probably the easier it'll be to just ride it and just enjoy it and surf it.
Okay, yeah, but maybe the bigger question is, when is it not serving me?
Yeah, but in trying to answer that question of being clever, I think maybe I got a lot of messages that was that's how you go forward in the world, that's how you succeed, and that's how you even survive. That the cleverer you are, the better you'll be. You'll find it easier to survive. But I mean, it's also about, I realise now how much. It's not just about being clever. It's about trusting yourself. I think about being clever is you have to always be told by other people that you are. But if you just trust yourself and don't always know how you know things, you just go with it. I think I'm more in that space. I mean, I was really driven to do well in exams and get into a good university, and I did. I mean, I was at Cambridge. And then I did a PhD, and I don't even know why I did, because I really didn't enjoy it. In terms of,
I mean, we do a lot of things as kids that we don't enjoy. Right?
Yeah, and I was a kid. I was like 22 or 23 or something.
What was the PhD in?
Group singing and how it forms community. So a really lovely subject, and I'm glad I did it now, but it was painful as I did it. And it also was looking at like rhythmic synchronization and how we come together in time, and it's actually being in time with each other that makes us feel like as one.
Co-regulation.
Yeah, I mean, like in a podcast situation like this, the rhythm kind of goes I talk for a bit, and then there's a moment where you realize you should talk, and we kind of pass over, and then you start singing in groups. You all sing at the same time, or you're all, even if you're singing at different times to each other, you're all linked to one beat.
Sure.
Whether it's a drum or it can be even like not in the sound, but you can know what the pulse is, and it's that pulse that brings everyone together. So I think the more I go through life, the more I'm interested. I want to bring people together in community. That's everything I do. I mean, I do pilgrimage, which brings people together in community. Both the pilgrims together as a group, but also then meeting locals and strangers and that community in that sense. But also my musical comedy duo that I'm in, called Bounder and Cad, we make people laugh together, and that creates a sort of community. And this website to do Choral Evensong Trust, getting people to go and watch people sing together, and then maybe part of that and feel that community. Like more and more community seems to be the thing, wanting to come together, because it's quite hard to as we become more globalized, it's harder to find it.
Harder to find
community, I think, and the feeling of it. And I think a lot of the good stuff in the New Age movement. Why do I call it New Age? I mean, I don't know, just because that seems to be a term that's sort of.
I think people know what you mean when.
Yeah, it's sort of anything that's not old and feels new. I mean, it probably is old, actually. A lot of the stuff, the really good stuff in the New Age movement, is probably old.
It's, making sense of today through some sort of map that, doesn't relate to anything else.
Yeah. There's, I think, there are these Instagram influencers that do, breath work or gongs or, all these different kinds of practices that help you feel yourself and your body and your emotions. But there's also a desire, as well as that, to come together into groups. Like in this space, I was actually in this space with breath work and a gong ceremony, which is amazing, with Jamie Clements and Samita and Sunita. And it was really special doing it with other people. And so there's this mixture of like the individual versus the group. And that was a big focus on my PhD, is like, okay, we've got these individuals, they're doing their own thing. And then we've got the group and it's doing its own thing. And how do they come together? And that's been a big focus, I think, of my life, really. And
I think there's a pivotal moment in time, and I believe we've met for that reason. I don't know why, but I get that impression with you that we've met, and it's similar probably how you're meeting other people, because you're leaning into other things potentially. That's an assumption.
Yeah, it's true.
But then you have something really valuable to bring, and I think that's really important to notice, because we're all in our own little echo bubbles, communities, but like there is this energy which encapsulates the space, which is like, we want to do this for the betterment of us as humans. There's that essence to most spaces that are like about us bettering our own selves. So there has to be like a recognition of that's going to ripple, and we want that for everyone. However, in those echo chambers, often there's blind spots and shadows and things that come up, and that's common in the spiritual communities. And it feels a little bit more of a betrayal, personally, when I see that, when you're saying you're standing for something, but actually you're not looking over here at this part that why are you not accepting of this person over here because he talks differently or dresses differently? Like, is that something maybe we could look at? If we're saying we're standing for the betterment of ourselves and others, like, can we be a bit more inclusive? And I really try my best to look where I'm doing that. So when I'm making a judgment about a certain crowd, or am I just trying to keep these people and just keep this bubble and just be safe over here? Is that what I'm standing for? Or am I trying to like be as inclusive as possible and trying to like everywhere I go be that same person? So relate it back to you. I think you could, I'm seeing that you're bringing like what you're speaking to now is like this kind of, I don't know, it's like it's just more perspective, it's like the integration of like those circles kind of creating more ripples, maybe.
I think there's a big thing going on, and we can see it all around, of not knowing how we relate to the system, not knowing how the system should work, and not knowing how we should be as an individual. We get really confused between the two ends of the equation, We also don't want to be too selfish, and we don't want to have too much ego, and so all that kind of language around being to yourself and too about yourself. But you also don't want to be so connected to the system and just in service of the system that you have no individuality either. It's about and getting that balance really right, and understanding how a system works on the basic level, and then just understanding how an individual works and how they come together and how they relate. And it's a constant like shift and dynamic between the two. How individual you should be, and how system-led you should be. Like it's really hard. But I mean, as a guiding principle, I realize now that the challenge is for me to become as loving as I possibly can be of as many people as possible, of many different kinds of people. And actually, like, I'm getting fairly comfortable in the tribe that I'm finding, and I really like the people I'm mixing with now. But I'm also realizing it is like it's narrowing. I can feel it.
What's narrowing?
The kinds of people that I'm meeting. They're also growing too. They're also becoming diverse. But
the people that you want to interact with and don't. What's healthy for you and what's not? I'm asking that question a lot more now.
Yeah. And I've got different inner rules. But then why have I got rules? Like,
what's your inner rules?
I don't know. Like, well, I suppose, it's so attractive, all this stuff with all these practices that can make you feel. It's sure. Like that actually, I just want to spend more and more time with people who do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then you might not talk to a whole other different group who don't do all that, who are different to you, and you're like, but actually they've got something to offer. I mean, the clearest case I have of like me not being as big as I want to be,
okay,
is with the Pilgrimage Trust. Like my chairman said, why don't you go to this school in Peckham, this youth club, and see if you can do a pilgrimage with them. And I went, and I suddenly found myself in this club where the leader was this 13-year-old boy who was black and came from a very different background to me. And then the adult who was sort of looking after the youth club said, if you want to do this with our youth club, you're going to have to convince this guy.
Wow.
Because he basically runs it.
The 13-year-old?
13-year-old. So suddenly they put me in front of this 13-year-old. Who was the boss? Who's the boss of this whole thing? It's quite obvious. And he looked at me and he just was like, go on then. What have you got? Kind of thing. And I just suddenly realized I was at my limit. I didn't know what to say to him. And I was ill prepared for that moment.
Mm.
And he said like, yeah, so will we get what food will we get on? Will we be able to go on the Emirates airline? And he had like specific things he wanted. But I thought, how do I do this? Like I just didn't know. And I realized there's a kind of limit.
Mm-hmm.
And so those limits when you think you can speak to everyone, and then you realize maybe you need to learn something. So yeah, like what you were saying about wanting to open up all the time, see, not judge this group, not judge that group. I mean, it's like, I think it's a lifetime's work, isn't it?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Powerful image though of like that kind of capacity of just being not, because it's quite a lot to hold in that moment of like, how do I even communicate to this person that's going to get through to them, and like, what do I have to bring to them that they've not already faced? Are they even interested? Like, why am I because there's a lot going on, I guess, in the...
Yeah, and it didn't work. I mean, it didn't. Yeah. I failed. So it was a kind of bit of a reckoning.
But that's great though, right? You'd rather be like, how do you relate to that situation? Do you wish you'd never gone? Are you glad for the opportunity and what that's made you realize? And like,
I'm glad I went. I'm also glad I realized that at some point I was going to have to meet this. I'm going to have to do this because
it's the hero's journey, right? It's like,
yeah, and maybe I'm now moving into a space where I will start finding out how to speak to different kinds of people and get them interested in this. Because if pilgrimage is as widespread and as mainstream and as like potentially mainstream as I think it is, eventually I will have to be able to speak to all these groups. It will have to actually work for everyone. It's like, and how do we get to that point?
If you can make it work for that 13-year-old,
yeah,
then
like
doors opening.
Kind of, yeah.
So root us in pilgrimage and what it means for you, and when you first kind of embarked on that journey.
Well, in relation to what we've just been chatting about, it's walking your own path, and doing that by walking an outer path, so actual physical path in the land to a destination, and that can be of any kind you like. It really is it's open to you, but in general, people will start to gravitate towards the more really tried and tested, like society thinks this place is a pilgrimage destination, because usually over time there's a reason why certain places become more important than others. But ultimately it is your choice where you walk to, and then you visit holy places along the way, churches, cathedrals, mosques, temples, synagogues, gurdwaras, and then ancient trees, holy wells, springs, river sources, caves, islands, hilltops, stone circles, barrows, waterfalls, all these different kinds of places, and you join them up into one route. And it does something to you visiting these places, and especially if you start the journey with an intention, some kind of something you want to bring into your life and let go of, or a question you want resolving.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that simple. It's like, set your destination, set your intention, and then walk, and then just allow the rest to happen.
As soon as you started saying, I was like, you're kind of walking that intention home, or like you're doing, it's like you're actively journeying physically, embodied, with a real question.
Yeah.
Maybe. I've never done a pilgrimage, really.
No.
As everyone knows, the Camino de Santiago.
Yeah.
It's popular, but I don't know of many others.
They often go with a question, and
okay,
and then they let go. I mean, that's the only thing you can do, really, because it may not be that your question is the right one. It might actually be that you're there to find out something else.
I love that. Yeah, my friend Daniel Griffiths, he's if you ask a question, or he has a question, it's like, it's not the right question. And like finding the right question is really overlooked. I've overlooked it. Yeah. It's like, I have many questions, but like, what's the right one for this moment? Yeah.
And actually, we don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but that is what this is one of the main things I'm excited about AI. You probably won't expect me to say anything
Careful.
like that. But one is that it switches the drive to becoming better at asking questions.
Okay.
Because if you ask the right question of the machine, it'll answer you. Whereas education until now has mainly been about finding the right answer to questions that are preset for you. But actually there's going to be a flip, because now all the data's there, all of the kind of stuff is there that you can just access, but are you asking the right question? And that's where it's going to be more creative. I think that is a shift that I don't hear many people talking about too much, but I see it. But the difference between AI and walking in the land is the land is alive. It's nature. It's got that green, verdant force in it, like the green knight or the green man, the green woman, like bursting forth, and leaves and the vine and the trees, and it's a very different way of knowing, and it's proper, it's really proper, and you get to be with that. I mean, for me personally, I was doing a PhD. This is how I got into pilgrimage, and I was getting really lonely, because it gets lonelier and lonelier the further you go through the PhD, because your focus gets narrower and narrower, and you end up working harder and harder because you've got to get it done. And towards the end, I was house sitting for this scientist and his wife called Rupert Sheldrake and Jill Pearce. You probably heard of those guys. And Merlin and Cosmo, their sons, were having dinner. I was house sitting, they were having this dinner, and then they'd invited these two wandering minstrels So wandering minstrels is like a medieval thing where you walk from town to town singing songs, and that would be your way of getting bed for the night and food. And people say singing for your supper as a joke, but actually, like these guys were actually singing for their supper.
Wow.
And they were talking about sleeping in the woods, cooking by the campfire, bathing in the rivers and streams, and foraging for food, and singing for their supper, and being welcomed into pubs and people's homes. And I just thought, that sounds a lot more alive than what I'm doing. Like, I really want to do that. It was like an antidote to what I was doing. So I said, when I'm done, can I come on a walk with you? And he said, yeah, why not? So this guy...
What did they look like, these wandering minstrels?
It looked like they did have quite a lot of hair, as you might expect.
Sure.
They were very intentional about their clothing.
Okay.
So there was a sort of pilgrim chic thing going on, which is basically like boiled felt wool and satchels with like pockets and things, and then a beautiful dog with Bowie-coloured eyes, like blue and brown, and then a walking stick, wooden staff, a pilgrim staff, all natural fibres, and then they were slightly more alive in their eyes than most people. It's a rebellious act to live like that. They've been living like that for 10 years and walking from town to town. And so a year later, actually during that year, I walked the River Cam, so the source of the River Cam to Cambridge one day. I had no idea how many miles you're supposed to walk in a day. I think it was something like 25, 30. Which is I've never done since. I would never do it again. But I did that many.
What do you mean you're supposed to? As a human, or
as a human, yeah. It's too
I
much.
heard
It's too much,
gatherers used to walk about 20 miles a day.
I think when you get going, you could get up to that pace, and
Sure.
But I think much more than that, and it's just you're sort of pushing.
I don't think
you're
there
pushing.
There's a limit.
I favour the 10 mile a day pace, because it means you can spend more time stopping and staring and chilling, absorbing the places you go through, meeting people, having chats along the way. You're not under that pressure to get the miles done, which gets into a kind of slightly tunnel vision mindset, can be, if you're pushing your body. It's a mixture. Like if you do 100 miles in 3 days or 100 miles in 7 days,
yeah,
which is the deeper, longer pilgrimage. It's the 7-day one. It's the same number of miles.
Window of tolerance. I think pushing that edge, but not like losing yourself within it, because then you're losing sense of where you are.
Yeah.
It's like meeting that, I think.
Exactly.
Okay, so these wandering minstrels.
Yeah, wandering minstrels.
So
yeah.
a year later.
Did this. Walking a river, just on that point, is walk from source to sea is a brilliant thing to do for anyone, because the river where you were born or where you now live, walk it from source
River
to
Severn.
sea. Yeah. Have you ever walked it?
My friend has, but I'd love to, yeah.
Yeah, there's something about it. I think it's because a river is an archetypal pilgrimage route, because it has a beginning.
Quite flat as well.
Flat. Yeah, there are human settlements along it. People like building near rivers. So
sure.
There's a logic to it. But also, the beginning is like a small trickle with pure, innocent, perfect, sparkling water.
And the end is just polluted.
And as you go along, like influences come in and it grows, and in complexity and size, and then eventually it opens into the sea, and and it dies. The river dies in a way, but it also changes into something else.
That's the birth, isn't it?
There's a birth into the next bit, into the next part of the cycle. This is really good for the metaphor of life itself. Like it is like that innocence and the purity and the sparkliness of the beginning, the source, is like being a baby. And then as you think of the baby's clear eyes, so that purity, and then as you go along, you change, you become more complex, you become more of a mixture of things, and then you grow and grow and grow in spirit if you keep going, and then eventually you meet the oneness, and then you go to the next stage, So it's really good and it's one whole route, like the river is unbroken. So it really works, land meets inner metaphor is perfect. But there are other things, you don't have to just walk rivers. And then, so a year later, I said, let's go. And he goes, all right, let's take a song back to where it came from. I was a singer as well. So when I was at university, I sang in the choir and it was quite, it was a big part of my life, singing. So the idea of taking...
You're going to say quite good?
I was going to say quite good, yeah. I'm quite good singing. But I don't know, smiling and looking like please myself. It's part of me. It's part of who I am.
Celebrating that, man. We were the singing people, right?
Yeah.
In England, and apparently, so Sam Lee tells me.
Yeah.
We were the singing people, and we don't value that anymore. We actually look down on it, especially when guys sings or men sing. There's something really sad about that.
It's interesting. We value it in like people like Mick Jagger, and these sort of rock stars who are like powerful, like masculine voices, but that
sure.
sort of
maybe differentiating. You can or can't sing, regardless.
Exactly.
Just sing. And it's that belief that I can't because you've been told, or it's not in tune, out of tune, whatever. Of course, there's a spectrum, but like, just sing.
Yeah.
Like, it's an access point to your soul, to your life force,
Yeah. I think we're in the West, we focus too much on the presentational kind of side of music making, of like the expert musician. And then there's this big barrier, and then there's this kind of obedient listening audience who don't make a sound, and they listen to the great musician. That's obviously great. I mean, obviously we've got to have that. But there's too much of that. It's imbalanced, because if you look at indigenous tribes all around the world, they're all participatory music. It's all about being involved. It's all about everyone singing. I mean, as part of my PhD, I studied a particular tribe in the Amazon called the Suya, and the Suya don't take any plants. There's no plant medicine for them. It's all done through singing. So I found that quite interesting. I didn't know, I now realize how unusual that is. And the rule is you've got to sing, and if you don't sing, you're not part of the community. So you're actually outcast if you don't sing. It's like the opposite to us.
Yeah.
Be great, wouldn't it, if people started singing more?
Absolutely.
And just sing
it's a way
together.
of making sense of the world. It's a way of grieving. It can be it can be celebration. There's like no space where singing doesn't help. Maybe that's wrong, but I do think it can bolster connection, regulation, like being just a part of something outside of you, and it's not really about you, but you're contributing to the energy of something. And it's just such a way to, I really think it's like we're an animal and we need to express, and we are complex, and I think it's just a way to just, I want to say regulate, but it's like we're soothing ourselves by doing that, It's like singing to a baby. It can soothe the baby. It's like a very common thing. I think there's something to that.
Yeah, and often a lot of participatory singing is repetitive, and so you end up repeating short phrases, and that brings you into a kind of eternity space. A lot of more complicated music is changing the whole time, and it's so.
It's like mantras.
It's great, yeah. Mantras, they work really well. So. Yeah, I mean, my vision, if I ever get a kind of third or fourth wave to my life or career or something, I'd love to start a movement of bringing back working songs to factories. Because when you use your hands and doing a manual labor, you've got, your mind is free. You don't have anything going on in your mind. Like you can sing as well. When we're doing like email work or more like your head is full of stuff. So
I'm on board. I'd just love to see that.
Wouldn't it be great?
It would be great. I have this idea of in supermarkets, you know, they have minute silence, but you have like a minute and there's like a, we now welcome customers to sing along to this song.
Wouldn't that be great?
And it's like a minute, everything kind of shuts down. You can't pay for anything. And it's like, but I had this vision on Magic Mushrooms actually about that being dance, because we don't dance enough for me and my judgment, but I don't think we dance enough.
Yeah.
And I think inviting that into really mainstream places, services, like wherever it might be, and there's just music and we can just be and just have a moment of dance, and it just stops everything. Stop everything and just
I totally agree.
Sing.
And also I think, like, if you think of Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory and how you have,
every musical.
Yeah, like, but you have like the Oompa Loompas, and people sort of slightly go, ha ha ha, the Oompa Loompas, and you sort of look down on them a little bit. But they're great. I mean, imagine people stacking the shelves in supermarkets, and they're kind of singing not the Oompa Loompas
Slave
song, but
labour.
I know, it's funny, isn't it? It's like
we judge that. I don't know. There's controversy there, isn't there?
There's controversy. Why? I feel as I'm saying it, and I'm being some kind of like overlord, weird guy. But like,
I just think there's some conspiracies about Willy Wonka.
Oh, okay, fine. But let's maybe move away from that. But there's the idea of making menial tasks, like washing up songs, you know, like imagine if we all sang whilst we're doing the washing up, because there's often something, we've got our mind free, we're just doing this thing.
Well, it used to be tending to the land, right? And that songs would come outdoors, a way to pass the time. So how do we bring this back?
How do we bring it back?
What's the, because I notice it, I start singing, hanging out in different spaces, more circles, being in a circle, and I'm like, this never used to be a thing for me. I know people that don't ever spend time in a circle. It's always facing something, or like it's just never, like the integrity of a circle, you can't hide, everything's reflected, and it's like, it's just the integrity. It's like coming back to the fire. It's like the circle. So noticing that is also noticing how many times I'm in a circle and someone has a song and we all participate, and it's just like, oh wow, yeah. And that's the part of the remembering of like, we forgot to do this sometime, or it's been
it's really available to us. And I think also when we sing, we're vibrating our bodies, and people talk about vibrations all the time. It's another word like energy, the vibrations. But actually, you're literally vibrating yourself with your voice, your own voice. You're actually accessing organs and inner bits of you through kind of sound therapy that you are giving to yourself. And that's really special, A lot of sound therapy at the moment is external things having an effect on your body, which is great because, just lying back and just receiving is really enjoyable.
Passive healing.
Passive, but that has its place, and it's really special. But when you actually engage and you become empowered in your own vibrational healing through your own voice, it's really special. But if you don't feel like comfortable totally just doing it yourself, and you want to sort of generally experience singing first, there are ways that are free and happening every day. Like with Rupert Sheldrake, I started this website called choralevensong.org, and this is something that is so unpopular. I mean, I like starting things that are unpopular, like really, like it's a Christian church service with lots of music in it. Like when I felt when I first started, I was like, is this going to work? Is this going to be a thing? And I'm still working on it. But if you go into Westminster Abbey every day, or no, you have to go every day, but like it's happening every day. You can go whenever you like. It's free. You just you queue up at like 4:30, and then it starts at 5, and then
in the morning.
No, PM actually. It's even song. It's the meeting even point between day and night.
Every day.
Every day.
Wow.
World-class choir, singing the best music, the most sacred, soaring polyphony, like from the Renaissance period, like incredibly beautiful. No tickets required. It's like 45 minutes of basically pure music. The English that happens in it is 16th century, like Shakespearean English, and you don't have to believe anything. You don't have to say amen or anything. You just sit there and just let it wash over you, and that's available to everyone. And I have a WhatsApp group. I have about 300 people on it, and once a month we meet beforehand. Someone here, we walk a little bit towards it, queue,
love this so much.
Go to the evening song, and then we go to the pub afterwards. And people are absolutely amazed by it. They're like, I've been in London for decades, and didn't even know I could go in, and didn't realise that this was happening. And I know it. I know that it's happened because I was a choir boy. I was a choral scholar in a university, and then I know it. It's deep within me, but I forget just how much people don't realise what this is and how beautiful it is, and how much it can raise the spirit. And I have also heard, and this is more controversial, but there's this underground movement called Cathedrals on Cannabis, which is basically some people decide that they're going to get a bit, high before they go in. These places, like cathedrals, are designed to change consciousness. Their sacred geometry, the stained glass windows, the incense, the size of it, the depth of history, the symbols, the music, the improvisation of the organ, all these elements, and they change your mind.
So true.
And so, somehow we have to make church exciting, and the reason I say that is because these are our temples. They are the places where the spiritual energy has been anchored over hundreds of years, thousands of years, and I know that I'm as frustrated with what's happened with the church for a long time.
Yeah.
And what they do and how rigid they are and how they could be a lot more open. But when you experience them with this singing and when they're not telling you what to believe, and when it's just an experience, it's like it's so special. And we mustn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because the energy, if we're going to go back to that word, the energy of some of these places is just
ripe.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah, I agree. Every time I go into a new city, I generally go straight to the church cathedral, especially in Europe, like places.
That's great. Yeah.
It just feel and light a candle, or because you're right, it's an access point, and I don't need to stay in there long enough to feel like I'm being brainwashed. But there's also an element of life is sacred, and I want to make it more sacred. So going there, even just saying a prayer, like praying, there's so many. Have you started praying?
I mean, I need to do it more. I mean, but there is, if you ask a group of people, if you ask a random group of people if they meditate, most people will be happy with putting up their hand. They won't be nervous about that. It's absolutely fine. But if you ask them, do you pray? Very few people put up their hands. Because I guess there's a question about who are you praying to? What are you praying to? That's the question. If you're being grateful, who are you being grateful to? What are you being... you can just be grateful in a kind of general sense. But as soon as you ask the question a little bit more, there's a kind of what is going on here? And... but this... meditation is like an in-breath of clearing your mind, going back to the kind of essence of being, and not filling your mind with stuff. Prayer is about sort of pushing out into the world. It's like an out-breath of what you feel and what you want, and petitions, asking, being grateful. It's separate. It has content, prayer, whereas meditation generally is trying to remove content. So they're like that. In and out breath. They're like dynamically related. You sort of have to have both. I have a friend who meditates in the morning and prays in the evening. Yeah. To honour that in and out breath.
I love that.
It's
cool.
I've
started praying around food. And just to have a moment, because I noticed that as soon as that food is there in front of me, I'm all in, and I'm not breathing, I'm not anything, I'm just not really being present or grateful. It's bringing my awareness back to everything that's contributed to this being on this plate, But I'll go back home and I'm like, oh God, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to brace, and I'll pray, and there'll be an energy that's like I can feel surrounding me, judgments or whatever it is, their own insecurity of actually like doing something different. That just in its simplest sense.
And people, it's when you try and, if you bring into a group situation, let's say like there's this really fun dinner going on, like there's a lot of booze, it's like, you know, like cool people or whatever, like, and maybe a bit of flirtation going on, and you're like in this that kind of zone. If you get everyone to hold hands and go silent and sing a grace, it just doesn't, it's really hard to do that. And yeah, it would be great if we did, you know, just like 30 seconds. And then you can go back to the kind of wildness and all the fun and the frolicking and stuff. But when I've tried to do that, it always feels strange. And maybe one shouldn't. Maybe you should just like go with the flow and just do it. But
I'm pushing edges.
Yeah.
I'm that guy now. I always did, but in the opposite direction maybe of those edges. Be the one that was standing on tables and
really?
kind of that extreme.
Okay, yeah.
Now I'm the extreme of let's really be with each other and allow as best as I can, just kind of guide a moment of honouring why we're here. Because why we're here is really to be with each other. And it doesn't need to be anything more than that. But just bring our awareness back to that moment. It's not going to last forever. We're not going to be here forever. But I think that's it. I really do think when people don't want to sit in that moment, because stillness is just something that is very uncommon, especially in the kind of atmosphere that you're speaking to, because it's uncomfortable. And why is because for a moment we may have to contemplate that it's not going to last forever. You know, it's like that we have to drop in. Yeah. We have to drop in and be like, okay, can I feel for a moment instead of all the distractions?
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be very long. It has a big impact. But yeah, I just think there's a lot of the things we're talking about. They are. I don't know whether this is just immature, like playground language. I mean, but like uncool. But I know it sounds a bit sort of basic, that kind of language, but actually it is fundamentally sort of what's going on. You know, there's such a drive to be cool, to be fashionable, to be, you know, to be like wanted, but actually, what I am starting to notice is uncool is becoming cool, and it's really weird. And
cool is the representation of what you deem valuable, maybe amongst a set of peers that are going to get you approval or validation.
Yeah.
So that's what I try and focus on. It's like, how do we make men's circles cool? Like, what are people's access points? Because you have to make it appealing, or else it's not going to work. It can't be like, if I'm doing certain work that I want more people involved with, I have to make it appealing and cool. Yeah. It has to be like that also. Maybe bring in the Vivo-barefoots.
Yeah.
Are they cool?
I mean, are these cool?
How do we get people wearing functional footwear? It's more appropriate for your posture.
I mean, I think this is cool because of what it represents. But a lot of people, like, when I go to some parties with these shoes.
Yeah.
You know, look like, you know, clown shoes, frankly.
Because they're different.
But I used to get embarrassed by that. And I used to think, you know, well, these are the right shoes for me, but. And then people used to sort of point and sort of laugh, literally, so like call them just call them like spatula shoes or something, like, which is really, really, like, really. And I mean, when someone says that, you start to think, well, wow, should I really be doing this? And anyway, I'm now.
You can't argue with a foot-shaped shoe.
A foot-shaped shoe.
Yeah, instead of a shoe-shaped shoe.
I mean, I think that's beautiful. I look at that shape now. I think that is the right shape.
But we've been conditioned.
And I look at these pointy things, I think, what the hell is that? That is the weirdest thing. And yet that is the right thing, the point.
The cool thing.
Cool thing. This is the sort of, you know...
Uncool, fringe.
Uncool, like slightly kind of, you know, hippie, hobo, kind of... Not hobo, that's the wrong word. Bohemian, like...
but this is social norms versus natural norms.
But I have to say, I am now so all in on this. I think
you have to be all in.
I welcome the kind of they're laughing at it, because I'm just like, oh, guys, if only you knew. Like, there's so much, there's such deep confidence in what this represents and what it's trying to do, and actually realizing just how radical it is. And something simple as, something simple as a shoe, like
so
how much difference that makes to people's lives. But this is even more special, this particular boot.
Go on.
Because it's the first grounded shoe that Vivo-barefoot have ever done.
Yeah.
So the main thing about Vivo-barefoots is they're wide here, thin, as in they're like thin soles, so you can feel everything underneath, and flexible, like that. They can do. So that most soles are quite stiff, and then that means you have to work against it. So it's trying to get out of the way of your foot so you can just move. But the next thing is electrically connected to the ground. So a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of energy could be partly electromagnetic as well. I mean, there are vibrations on many levels, but it's a kind of field thing. It's like a force field. And with these, you can be in touch directly through your body with the ground, the
What about
earth.
if you're wearing socks?
Socks are all right.
No, as in with the grounding.
Yeah.
Does your skin have to be on the...
No, as long as it's moist. And, your sweat creates, and it's the water.
Current, yeah.
Yeah, the current between the two. So you'll be fine, with socks. But that
an access point to something that you might have been wrong about before, which I think can be really pivotal. And it was for me when I understood that the shoes that I'm wearing weren't... If I cared about my health, then I'd care about my foot health.
Yeah.
And that's linked to shoes that are shaped in a certain way that's going to compromise my physical anatomy. And the feet are the only thing that are in touch with the ground all the time. If that's not correct, then your whole body's going to be out of alignment to some extent. That was a way in for me. And I thought, if I was wrong about that, what else am I wrong about?
Yeah, it's true.
And then I just went through everything. I was
I
like, squatting. What's happened to the squat? Sitting in chairs. This is really just uncomfortable for me.
Really?
I can't move because I'm sat for an hour and I can't move my body. If I'm on the floor, my body will want to move.
Yeah, I can feel my neck. I'm having to pull my neck forward to try and keep in balance.
The things we do for healthy conversations.
I mean, it's a nice chair. But
do you know what I mean? Though it's like another thing.
Yeah.
And then
what are we not noticing?
Sitting on the toilet, it's not the appropriate position to be going to the toilet.
Did you ever get that thing called Squatty Potty?
Squatty Potty. I mean, the unicorn.
Even the brand name, like what but it makes so much sense.
It makes the sense. It's like it's breathing as well.
Puts quite a lot of pressure on the toilet seat. It almost sometimes comes off its hinges.
I've broke a few.
Exactly.
Time.
So there's downside, but overall there's upside because you're doing what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. It's like
There's just there are so many things. We've taken so many left turns over since the industrial period and probably before. It's just what are we missing? And I think
we're missing the story of what it means to be human. And I have this thing around corporations tell us what it means to be healthy, to be human. We're not telling each other anymore. What do we do with the old people? We don't really listen to them anymore. We don't really factor in how life was for them or what wisdom they have. I took it for granted when I was a kid. It's like they're kind of granny talking this again, or I didn't really listen. And I think that's such a shame. And it's a few generations ago, really, that wisdom has kind of been compromised for the amount of time we're spending being marketed to, being sold.
Yeah.
And it's that's a cost,
I really recommend everyone, if you've got a grandparent alive and they can they've still got their memory roughly intact, go and meet them and say, can I interview you about your life? And start from zero and just ask them all the questions you want to ask them about everything that happened in their childhood, as they grew up, as they fell in love, all the things, ask them. Because firstly, you can't access your great-grandparents or your great-great-grandparents unless you talk to your grandparents, because each generation knows further back. But I did it with my grandfather in the last year of his life. And I didn't know it was the last year of his life. He was 94.
Wow.
My chaplain at college said, why don't you go and talk to them and just interview them? So I took my phone and I got my voice memo out and I just recorded the chats. There was some pretty interesting stuff that was unearthed, like some taboos and secrets and that I didn't know about. And maybe he finally felt he could say, just right at the end of his life, like the truth of his life. It was absolutely amazing. I went 6 times and I think about 2 or 3 hours each time. And I got all these tapes and I gave them to my dad and my aunt, and there's so much more understanding about where we came from. I think this connection with ancestors is like really important. And as we get more and more like stuck on belief systems as to which religion's right or wrong, or which bit of it's right or wrong, it's like it's quite confusing and entangled. But ancestors, we can all agree on ancestors. Like we all have ancestors, and like that's sort of it's the body side of where we come from. Mm-hmm. Obviously, our soul comes from God, or the cosmos, or the soul is something else. But the body comes from our mum and our dad.
Yeah.
And so we need to know that to embody ourselves properly and to really know. Maybe you can make a pilgrimage to where your ancestors come from, all around the world or in Britain or wherever it is, as a destination in itself. But yeah, it started actually, the pilgrimage thing, I didn't really finish the story of how it started. It started with an ancestral pilgrimage, but it was about other people's ancestors. It was a song about these 37 hop pickers that had, from East London that were down in Kent hop
What's
picking.
What's a hop picker? Hops.
Yeah. Hops, yeah, for beer.
Yeah.
The plant. And they were crossing a bridge, and the bridge broke, and then and it was rotten, and 37 people drowned. Wow. 3 generations. And then there's this monument built to them in this churchyard, and also a song that was written about it, because they were kind of part of the gypsy community, like travellers, and so they were the songs were a big part of their culture, and so we took this song back, which had been languishing in a library archive of songs, and we walked along the River Medway for 70 miles, me and my co-founder Will of the British Pilgrimage Trust, and 7 days. And when we got to the monument in the churchyard, there was a couple standing in front of it, and we were like, okay, what are they doing there? Because there's no one else around, and it's exactly the thing that we were going towards. And they said, oh, well, we tried to find this place 10 years ago. We're only here for 5 minutes. We're just about to leave. And we're like, well, what are you doing here? What's your connection to it? And they said, well, 3 of my ancestors died in the tragedy.
Wow.
And we're like, wow. And then we said, have you heard the song? Because we've been singing the song to everyone we've met along the way. And they said no. So we thought we were returning the song to the place where it came from, but we were actually returning it to the bloodline. And we eventually then did go on to the place and sang it at the place, but it felt like the work had been done, once we'd sung it to the bloodline. And I walked away from that, and I was overwhelmed by emotion, and I knew that something was important about what had just happened. And I said to Will, I was like,
wow.
What was that? Because we weren't calling it a pilgrimage. We did like a song walk or something like that. We visited churches, but mainly to like charge our phones and cool down from the sun. We weren't going there with a specific sacred purpose. And we thought, well, it's a bit like a pilgrimage, or it's got more of a narrative to the journey. There's more of a purpose to it, and so more synchronicity and coincidence. The guy I walked with, Will, he's been this wandering minstrel, but because of the wanderingness, there was serendipity, but it wasn't like as much serendipity like per day. Like the rate of synchronicity was much higher on the pilgrimage, and he said, I really noticed this. And so he's like, okay, this is great. We can contract the journey, make it smaller, which is more relevant for most people, because he was doing like 9 month, 6 months, 10-month journeys, really long. But not everyone can do that, obviously. It's pretty rare. So walking for a week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or one day, if you add an intention, it creates extra synchronicity. And so then we thought, well, that's amazing. Pilgrimage, why is it not happening in Britain?
Mm-hmm.
And we are pretty aware of like the toxic brand of the church, you know, like it's bad. I mean, the brand of the Church of England is not good. I mean, it's picking up now, but it hasn't got the greatest sort of look. And we thought, well, what's going on? Why isn't there pilgrimage here? It's weird. It's all around the world, so why not Britain? And we learned that Henry VIII had banned it in 1538. Got Thomas Cromwell to write a injunction saying, condemning those who wander unto pilgrimages and mind beads and lick unto shrines. So the idea that they were licking shrines is kind of interesting. That was written in the injunction. We thought this is pretty interesting, but there's obviously a taboo around pilgrimage for some reason. And the way we talk about tramps as well, you know, the way people are quite... Tramps, you know, when we say like...
Where does that word come from?
Well, tramping is sort of like wandering outside of your
Super
parish.
tramp.
Yeah, so like there was this rule about if you wandered outside of your parish, you were whipped back to the parish of your birth.
I mean, I can believe it.
Vagrancy laws were brought in by Henry VIII as well. So the pilgrim, the vagrant, the wanderer, the tramp, that kind of journeying thing was like banned. And basically, this goes really but far back, you know, like you've got Adam and Eve, and then you've got Cain and Abel, and they're the children of Adam and Eve. Cain was like a farm guy. He was like owned a bit of land. He had his place, and he made his money, and it was his power, his domain. Abel, his brother, was this kind of wandering shepherd who just wandered the land. Didn't own anything as much, but wandered, and obviously came into a lot more synchronicity, serendipity, and stuff. And you know, for some reason, I can't remember the story, but Cain ends up killing his brother. Jordan
Peterson talks about this a lot.
The punishment of Cain for doing that is to wander like his brother. So it wasn't actually much of a punishment, like it was to wander, because wandering it's radical. You know, there's something radical about wandering. Staying put, having a house, renting a home, like owning a house. There's something like it's unconventional, but as soon as you say, no, I'm just going to go for a wander, I'm just going to walk. That's something radical about that. And I don't know why, because it sort of feels natural.
Isn't there something around banishing? Like there's a word, I don't think it's banish, but it was like a death sentence. You were banished from the tribe and you were dead.
Probably, yeah, it's probably something to do with that. But you also come into contact with other people in a vulnerable state. So
I think it's just the domestication of humans.
Yeah,
it's like zoo humans. It's the authority and just real.
We're meant to move. I mean, we are meant to move.
Yeah,
and
so it can be the biggest like imprisonment, right?
Yeah. And we do move. I mean, we walk around. It's not like we're imprisoned.
But back then it was, which is maybe more of a statement of what it really means to wander. There weren't boundaries, and people would just go the direct route, right? I would imagine.
Yeah, we're not. Well, I don't know. I'm not actually an expert on.
I guess private land was different. Like there'd be more spaces.
Yeah.
Without now, it's just.
Yeah, everyone knows, and it's digital, and you can know exactly where everyone is, and it's a lot more. It's a lot easier to demarcate land. But, yeah, I think moving does something to the way your mind works, the way your soul works. There's somehow there's this famous book done well recently called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and he's a Nobel Prize winner of economics. But he and his mate Amos Tversky, they did this sort of strange experiment where they looked at the difference between walking, sitting, and running. And running is really good for clearing the mind of content and basically going to a meditative state, and because you're focusing so much on the balance and staying upright and the physicality of it, that you don't have much mental space to think through a problem. Sitting is like you can execute a task you've already come up with, and you can just do it, and you can like, you know, when people get really to an intense part of the conversation, they might stop. You know, when you're talking to someone, they might, when someone stops and then they start like really going into the thing. So I don't know why we do that, but walking is a kind of in between those two states. It's like you can think, but it's also, you can't really like do tasks when you're walking. So it's more like flowy, and you kind of come up with creative solutions, and it helps work through emotions and all sorts of things. So it's a very gentle way of coming up with solutions.
Well, I think ancient Greeks and the philosophers of that time would have often wandered and then pondered, but like, yes, they'd sit on a rock, but that, like the walking thing, there's a lot to it. Ryan Holiday talks about no problem is ever made worse by going out for a walk. It's like there's something to that. It's like we are meant to walk all the time, every day. That's what we did for so many. And there's got to be an evolutionary advantage to walking, problem solving, and just like contemplating, but also like in between contemplation and action, or whatever that kind of area is that served us and allowed us to evolve. Yeah, man. Love it.
So, I mean, this is one aspect. I mean, right now it's my focus, and I really believe in it. I really believe that it can bring people together.
Well, it is.
It bring people together because you can walk alongside someone, not look them in the eye. You have totally different belief systems, and you can kind of drop into a level of conversation that is very rare. And
what's the difference between men and women in that space? What do you notice?
Gosh, good question. I mean, I'm just having to go straight to like my instinct, which is that.
What do you find men benefit from, but then women also differently, maybe? Because the social side of it, walking, it could be easier to bond as a man, walking side by side. They say women bond face to face, men shoulder to shoulder. Of like having that, having something that we can agree on, direction, and then there's less risk. There's less of a threat if we're just side to side on a collective mission.
I think it depends on the man. I think and the kind of men that I witness coming on the pilgrimages I lead. Like, I think they're probably a bit more open. Sometimes they're not. I mean, one guy on the retreat, he wasn't open, but he'd basically been sent there by his wife. She just decided that he needed to go on a pilgrimage, and he goes, well, my wife's usually right, so I just do what she says, kind of thing. And so he wasn't really open,
and she wasn't there,
but he was also open too, but he was tentatively open. He was sort of just discovering baby steps, but it was a safe place. It was safe for him. And I do say, like I say on the FAQs, you know, I say like there will be, you don't have to emotionally share at all. Like this, you can, if you want to, you can talk with people and share, but you're not going to be asked to. Because weirdly, that's
like the opposite of what I do.
I know, it's weird.
No, it's not like compulsory, but
it's not compulsory, but it's.
But is that a
maybe I should just be more open. It gets a different kind of person if you say that. You know, it gets people who.
What's the intention behind that FAQ? Is that to make it really inclusive, or what's the what's the why behind that?
There's a confidence to it because it's saying that this will have an effect even if you don't do that. Like, and it will happen anyway, and you know but it gives people permission to. Just go into themselves. I mean, we actually started these silent pilgrimages and the reason we started is because someone wanted to become a guide, but they didn't have much confidence in speaking loudly and doing history and in mythology and introducing people to spaces, and they had lack of confidence there. So they thought, well, why don't we just make it silent so I don't have to say anything and everyone else is silent too? Because there's a lot of kind of cocktail party effect of like everyone just talking to each other the whole time, and over days it can be exhausting, you know. constantly having to talk to people for hours and hours every day. So we tried this. We said, all right, let's give it a go, and we put it out, and it sold out like instantly. It was like really, really popular. People want to just be led along a path. They don't have to look at their maps. They don't have to think. And they want to be part of a group, but they don't necessarily want to have to talk to everyone.
There's something in me that's really drawn to that.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, just being really guided. But it's,
there's a kind of
listening, like how much attentive, what sensitivity I can build in like in the resilient sense of like being really attuned to what I can sense. That's not about telling my story or listening to others, and it's just like, gives you space just to be in, like, going through your own process. And also it's also that it shows something of what I think is different about pilgrimage to a lot of facilitation, is that if you're a facilitator in a room like this, you kind of have to create the experience all the time, and slowly down to you, and it's obviously you're opening up spaces and you're allowing stuff to happen that isn't like controlled by you as a facilitator in the room. But if you're out in the land, it's even less. The land just does so much of the work for you. It might be a bird that suddenly flies past and everyone looks at the bird. It's not nothing to do with you, and they might see a tree and they just start touching the tree, or they go to a sacred space and then the sacred space starts working on them. You don't have to say anything. You just let it be. You just let them experience it. And actually, the more you can get out of the way, the better, really. So what do you get mostly from these pilgrimages? Leading them? Like what
Leading them all day. More and more I'm enjoying just going with the flow and not necessarily knowing what I'm going to say next.
Trusting yourself.
Trusting myself, trusting that I'm being led by something beyond me, and that I don't need to worry about getting it wrong, that I can't get it wrong.
What would leaning into that more look like?
I
think you're doing it right now.
Yeah, maybe silence. Just waiting.
Yeah. Not having to fill the gaps.
Yeah, I think so. Because the right thing will always come if it needs to be said. It just does. But what also I get from it is when all of the ingredients are there and they come together, and then people start becoming really happy, and you can see in their faces they're discovering a kind of strange kind of joy that they don't really they don't understand, because it's not like it's not ecstasy. It's not ecstasy in a kind of really intense, like it can be, but it's not usually. It's like a gentle, like, okay, life's simple, it's gentle, it's good.
Can it be accessing a flow state?
Yeah, possibly.
Which I love the acronym of like selflessness. So you lose your sense of yourself when you're connected to something else, or like just the land speaking to you. Timelessness, which is
that's
sense of
definitely
time.
Happens.
Effortlessness.
Yes.
And then richness.
Yeah, that's all of those happen. The timelessness one's really interesting, the way that you get to the end of the day and you're like, wow, was that just a day? Like most people spend a day like
experience a lot,
and you experience a lot, and you can't believe that was only this morning that you were somewhere else. There's something about moving through landscape that I think changes time. I think
in novelty.
Yeah, but richness and effortlessness. Actually, yeah, when you're a facilitator providing the path to someone, they don't have to think, and they just and you're led, and they just sort of. It's effortless for them. But when you as the guide are becoming effortless, it's even more effortless for them. So it's really important, I think, as the guide to just really be relaxed and really in your flow, because you're sort of showing the group that they can be like that too. Bit like when a performer comes on stage and they look nervous, it's really, really hard to relax yourself, even if you're a relaxed person.
100%.
So it's just when I first started this, I was always trying to get everything right, remember all the facts of every place, and do the best job and like a sort of good student kind of way of doing it. And now I'm much less a good student, and I often haven't done enough preparation. But I just sort of sit into what I know a bit more and trust that it'll be fine. And yeah, it seems to be okay. People enjoy it, yeah. But the greater vision is that people lead themselves, and because if you rely on guides only to take people out, it's not going to grow really big, very big. So we're trying to, through the website, people can download all these routes to their phones and do it themselves. Put it on airplane mode, and you can. But you just need your phone to know where you are on the map. You don't need to get any notifications or anything; they won't come through. And then you walk through the land and you just visit these places, maybe with a small group of people that you love or that you want to get to know better, and then have your experiences. So that's I really trust that, because pilgrimage is a kind of general container practice where you can meditate, be grateful, connect with nature, connect with animals, sing, honor holy days and festivals, and fast if you want to, or do yoga, or there's so many options as to what you can do within the overarching like pilgrimage practice. That I feel it's really scalable, and it's entry level spirituality, and that's beginners. I like the fact it's really beginner. It's quite hard to be good at pilgrimage. It's quite weird actually if you start saying I'm really good at pilgrimage. It's like that's a kind of weird thing to say.
Same with spirituality.
Yeah, exactly. So I like that, and I like the fact that it's the land is what guides you. So you go to whatever's special in the land. You don't have a preconceived like this is what you're going to learn on this. It's like if there's a temple there, then you go to the temple. If there's a ancient tree, you go to that. Yeah. There's no like preconceived thing.
Yeah, I love it because it feels like a healthy thing to do, and it really takes us back to a previous time. I believe it's like a portal back to when we were living in harmony or right relationship with place, and it feels like that. It feels like taking a journey through the land and walking with a purpose. It's just coming back to ourselves and the places in which we go. That's really like the podcast mission. It's like it is a pilgrimage, really. It's like a pilgrimage back to us, and the pilgrimage really is internal for me. Like that's the place. Like everything else is we've discovered a lot, and I'm not saying there's nothing else to be discovered outside, but it's like what's the journey now to really understand this landscape of internal, and I think that's what we are doing. But you can, you're not in the world and you're not in yourself, you're in both, and it's like how can we kind of meet ourselves without losing touch of outside.
Yeah, and to know that we need the outside too. We need to be in. It's not really outside. There's sort of this like this,
of course, yeah,
completely like there's no, it's like no, there's sort of no separation. No, but there also is, and there isn't. Yeah.
Anything we've missed out of this journey that you want to dive into? Anything that you think is important, or an invitation for people?
Yeah, I think. Okay, I don't know whether it's important for everyone else, but it's important for me, and it's what I'm going through at the moment, which is that I think there's a tension in this space between fully connecting with the body and the material world and being on earth and being human, being all that stuff of the world, and being spiritual in the kind of cosmos, the kind of connected with the divine, that's sort of not so bodily. And it's about bringing those two things together. and not privileging one over the other. Not saying that like being out there and in this special realm and stuff is better than being in the body, or not saying that being in the body is better than that. But bring them together and honouring both.
Yeah.
And I suppose eventually discovering they're one, but that's sometimes difficult to do. So, it's an old tension for thousands of years. I mean, it's not like a new problem.
No.
It's the big one, and I think that's why I'm drawn to things like singing, which is a kind of perfect between space between those two, because obviously you have to use your body to do it, but also through singing you're accessing that other world too. So you're in the breath is like physical and not physical at the same time, and sound is physical and you can't see sound, but he's sort of there. And so there's singing, and then the pilgrimage is through the body, through becoming really in the world, through really like grounding yourself, grounding with your body, your electrical, but also through that you're more anchored, so you can like explore that inner world more. And I suppose you haven't really talked about comedy, like, and the place of that in my life.
Yeah. Not taking life so seriously.
Yeah, or taking comedy really seriously. I don't know, like we've got all these like. There's a lot of black and white thinking where you end up with like two sides, and we see this a lot
on this podcast.
Like polarization, like two
Great.
things that are like opposite, and they're both clearly true.
Sure.
They're both like, there's both something valid about both, which is the reason there's a problem in the first place, is because one person does have valid arguments on this side, the other person does have valid arguments on that side.
Yeah.
What humour is really good for doing is clashing those two things together and making you like doing something that your kind of mind just goes, and it laughs, because the only thing it can do is laugh, because there's no way of solving the clash.
Sure.
So I think humour's a lot more important than we realise in terms of just dealing with all of these like black and white polarised issues. I can't take credit for the sort of the cleverness of the lyrics of our songs. So my partner writes the songs.
Have you got one? Could you recite?
We got a Putin song.
Okay, go for it.
To the tune of Sugar Plum Fairy. It's quite long. I don't know where do I start? Maybe at the I'll just do the beginning bit and then I'll jump to the end.
All right.
He is greatest, there's no greater. He's our country's great dictator. Yet we have leader who is very best, bare of chest, scariest, plays it by the book, democratic man. 'Cause the party isn't over yet, Privyet, Soviet, power has new look, very sexy man. People, it's your favorite comrade here, Vladimir, glad I'm here. President with guts, always wins the vote. They respect me, popular your note. Try eject me, better fetch your coat. Re-elect me, doesn't mean to gloat, and I will crack your nuts. Democracy runs speedier, at a better rate with a one-party state. And when you run state media, just in case control, army of Facebook troll, we're rooting for Vlad Putin, he's straight shooting, disagree, and you'll see. Foreigners obey. He has gas, so overlook his faults. You need volts, mine Herr Scholz, got you little rat, very anti-gay, very macho, likes a photo op, judo chop with no top. Nothing gay with that. Radioactive tea? Old defector will get quite a shock. Knocky knock, Novichok. And I've other tricks. Kremlin gremlin he. You may hate me. Sanctions, OMG. isolate me, doesn't worry me, can't checkmate me, he has money tree till 2036. Da.
And that was all of it, or the start and the end?
That was all of it, actually. I just went on with it. Sorry, you can cut anything. You can cut anything you like. I don't mind.
Amazing. Holding truths.
We did a Brexit song to the tune of My Way, which is sung from the French perspective. And the weird thing is, when we do it, we have people who vote to remain who come up to us and say, "Thank you so much for writing that song. It's really, you've really written it for me."
They do this in Germany.
And then we have Brexiteers and Leavers who come up to us after the song too, who say, "Thank you so much." They both believe it's their song.
I love that.
And that is.
But they do this in Germany. I remember I did a cycle tour, which was kind of a pilgrimage. It was a pilgrimage, actually. London to Istanbul. And I stopped off with a lot of people that warm showers, this kind of couch surfing for cyclists. Yeah. Phenomenal. Every night, new accommodation. It was in the winter, so I couldn't stay outside. I'd have died. And I stayed with this family in like the absolute rural Germany. And it was the time of the elections. And you might know this, but the satire that they have, it's every year.
It's brilliant.
It's incredible. And it's this, there's obviously different regions in Germany, and they all have different ideas, and they're all interlinked, but they have different dialects, and it's quite segregated, really. Like people in down here don't like these guys, and it's like they're all it's fascinating, but makes for great comedy.
Yeah.
And I think it was all the politicians were invited to watch the show. They come and watch the show, and it's a theatrical show, which is like, it's almost like fancy dress or like just a theatre performance, and they just basically take the mick out of everyone. Yeah. And all the politicians are like, it is fake. But it's like it's just amazing. It was amazing to witness. Like now that's still happening, because the jester used to be the person that the king. I mean, you'll know more maybe about this, but like the jester was the person that I know that would come and tell jokes to the king, and it would just make fun of the royalty. And
we've actually been in that exact position, and it's really early on in 2013. We were, due to some fluke, we were invited to sing at the Christmas staff party of 10 Downing Street. And my friend called me up and said, "Look, we've got 4 days, but I think I can write a parody song of me and my shadow," which is a kind of Cameron and Clegg duet. And I said, "All right, go on then." So we wrote it, and then we sent the lyrics by email to the person we were in contact with. But then they felt, well, we better check this out. And then they sent it up through all the ranks, right to the top of the principal private secretary, who's part of the cabinet, who said, "Yeah, very funny, but too close to the bone, so don't perform it." But we thought, why don't we just at least learn it? All right, so we learnt it, and then we had the whole state dining room to rehearse in for the whole day, which is incredible. And then we came to the actual gig, and Cameron was there, not Clegg. But Cameron was dancing his socks, and his children were there, and like all the hundreds of staff, and it was kind of an amazing experience. And then he left the room, and we'd finished our Christmas songs, and so we said, "Should we sing the song?" And then the deputy chief of staff said, "Go on, they've all heard, they all know it. They just sing it anyway." So we sang it, and just like the roof came off. I mean, the roof came off. It was absolutely amazing. It was an amazing experience. And you've basically, as a jester, you've got to kind of take the piss enough so you're doing your job. You've got to actually it's got to be difficult for them, but it can't be over the line. Because if you go over the line, in old times, you'd have, really serious consequences as a court jester if you went too far. You might die or be tortured or something. It wouldn't be like that now, but you might lose your career or something.
Ricky Gervais.
Yeah.
Golden Globes, didn't he get kicked out? But he would push and be...
Yeah.
Some of his hostings are just like that.
But he has to go quite far. Like, otherwise he's not
Everyone's
really...
so uncomfortable. It's just crazy.
You have to... It's best if people do just actually laugh and it's not too uncomfortable, but you're still kind of making the point, and, it's hard. But I just think... we'll get there. There'll be more of this stuff coming out, more satire. We're good at it, the Brits. We've got a whole tradition of it.
Yeah.
Just we need more of it.
I think it's the last freestanding public speaking that you're allowed to go there without being cancelled.
Okay.
It's like what freedom of speech. Protests are even being, pushed away, and there's legislation around that, and it all came to a head in COVID, and it's like, well, what can you say? Like, even like the centralization of platforms now, it's like you can't say, you're kind of serving to their agenda. But comedy stores, it's really the only place where you can speak whatever you want.
So it exists in a kind of different reality.
Yeah,
you're allowed to. It's interesting. Yeah, it's hard to do. I mean, it takes time, but I think we could all just have a bit more of a play.
Absolutely, we've got to have fun, or else what's it all about?
Exactly.
Yeah, man. Thanks, man. It's been so fun.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah.
Yes. Where can people find you, or even watch one of your shows, or
right. Well,
come on a pilgrimage?
Okay. Well, we run guided pilgrimage events monthly, and around the place, around Britain. BritishPilgrimage.org is the website. You can either download routes to go on your own with your friends, or you can come to an event. We are a charity, so that we're giving away all this free, apart from the events. But there's a book showing you all the places and pilgrim routes in Britain, Britain's pilgrim places. We perform in London for this is my Bounder and Cad, my singing comedy duo, and that's at Brasserie Adele in Piccadilly, nice underground kind of restaurant with a cabaret venue called Crazy Cox, that's spelled with a Q. And then Choral Evensong Trust, if you want to go, and I don't know where your listeners come from, but all over the place. But yeah, I mean, all over Britain and Ireland and the world, there will be some kind of sacred music going on that you can just rock up and listen to. And it's special because the music is pointed in towards love. So yeah, those are, I suppose, my three things, and maybe more in the future. But right now, there we go. And me, I'm slightly embarrassingly called at Dr. Guy Hayward. That's just because I got a PhD. But like, maybe I should take it out.
Why is it embarrassing?
Sounds like I'm sort of showing off or something, but maybe that says more about me than. But anyway, I got a bloody doctorate, so yes. So that's what it's, and yeah, at Pilgrim Trust, and yeah, just whatever way you can, just go and love the land and sing. That's all I can say. I mean, there are other things to do, but that's what I'd say.
No, it's a great invitation. Yeah, beautiful, man. Touched on some amazing points, and yeah, really feeds into and overlaps a lot of the things. Might not be directly, but like indirectly, I think. Loads of stuff you're doing and how you're speaking to, speaking to church and those sorts of things, and the sacredness in which you speak to that. It's like we need more of that. I notice a hole there of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater with the religion, which we've done, and that comes at a cost.
And I think as you mentioned psychedelics earlier, I think a lot of, from what I've heard, a lot of the community of psychedelics, psychedelic people who explore that world, are actually starting to crave the structure of religion to bring you back into some kind of like tradition that holds you. Yeah, because you can really. Yeah, and I think that's it's actually there's a tide turning, I think, and it's not being seen as just a toxic brand with loads of like PR issues and problematic like practices as the church. That is slightly shifting. People are starting to realize it does actually offer something. Yeah, for sure. Messy community, like the individualist journey of discovering your own path spiritually is one way, but you at some point you have to engage with the community and all the people you don't really want to hang out with, and join, you know, the local. There's something about becoming part of something bigger than just you, and all of the trickiness of that, and those two things coexisting. But the structure and the tradition and the heritage and that the connection with hundreds and thousands of years of deep practice before you is really special and is craved, I think.
Yeah, I notice that's needed. It makes sense. Tradition is not the worshipping of the ashes, but the preservation of the fire. And I really think there's something to that quote, because it's not just about singing, worshipping, passively being spiritual, wearing the things, being associated, worshipping, but it's actually like rooted in action of like the preserving of culture, of like the places you are.
Yeah.
Do you wrap it up?
Yeah.
Thank you, man. Yes.